Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is a guide to Wyrmprints in Dragalia Lost as of July 2020. Last time I made a video like this, I looked through most Wyrmprints in the game and rated them on a 1 to 10 scale. This time around, I'm more interested in helping new players decide which Wyrmprints to prioritize investing in early on and why. With that being said, let's go over some basics of what Wyrmprints are and how they work. For those new to Dragalia Lost, Wyrmprints are magical cards which grant one or more abilities and provide a small boost to HP and strength to adventurers. Adventurers can equip up to 2 prints at a time once you beat Chapter 4 of the main story. Some Wyrmprint abilities are locked to certain weapon types or elements, so check the ability name when in doubt. Duplicate copies of Wyrmprints can be merged together to unbind the print, raise its max level, and boost its abilities. The maximum number of unbinds is 4, and print abilities get stronger in increments of 2 unbinds. And Wyrmprint abilities also have caps, or maximum values, that limit how much of a given type of ability you can stack up across both of your print slots on a single adventurer. Be careful not to stack too much of one ability on a unit, or you'll exceed the cap and any excess is wasted. Wyrmprint stats vary slightly, but it's really the abilities you should focus on in deciding what to use. Eventually, you'll have many options to select from, but early on, every print is an investment. That's because specific Wyrmprints are purchased via the shop by spending Eldwater, a free currency which is also used for upgrading adventurers' co-abilities and chain co-abilities. Some Wyrmprints are permanently available for purchase in the shop, while others rotate in and out on a limited time or seasonal basis. Besides the shop, some Wyrmprints are given out for free during events, and Wyrmprints can also be obtained randomly as drops from quests. A few free Wyrmprints from past limited events are excellent, but most are slightly weaker due to their freebie status, and as for prints which drop from quests, well, what you get largely comes down to luck. Therefore, the main question we'll try address in this video is which Wyrmprints to buy from the shop. This is the area where you'll have most control over your decisions and your progress in the game. I would broadly classify Wyrmprint abilities into 3 categories: offensive, defensive, and utility. Offensive abilities are ones that boost damage. Think of strength, skill damage, affliction punisher, and critical rates. Defensive abilities include defense, recovery, elemental resistance, and healing double buffs. And finally, utility effects include a mix of specialized bonuses like buff skill time, skill prep, and shapeshift prep. Most prints have 2 abilities with no real restrictions on how these categories are mixed and matched. When you're first building a collection of Wyrmprints, you should prioritize those which are useful on a variety of adventurers, particularly if those prints are powerful enough to also see use in endgame content. For most adventurers, this will mean you generally want to invest in prints with offensive abilities. Prints with defensive and utility effects are often more niche or only become relevant in endgame auto battles. This isn't to say they aren't good, they're just useful on a smaller set of units or require higher investment. With that being said, I think the best print to get first is Resounding Rendition. This print grants both skill damage and critical rates, 2 effects that are useful on almost all attacking adventurers in the game. If this print isn't the best source of skill damage for an adventurer, it's often at least the second best pick. And for many adventurers, this is already just the best. I would recommend spending Eldwater to buy 3 copies from the shop so that you can unbind it twice. Eventually, you can collect golden keys from the event compendium to snag the last 2 unbinds without spending any additional Eldwater. You want to either save keys for limited prints or use them for the last few unbinds since those cost more Eldwater. The best print to get second is Jewels of the Sun. This is much less clear-cut than Resounding Rendition because the limited time anniversary print United by One Vision is almost always better than Jewels. But depending on when you start playing, you may or may not have access to United by One Vision for a long time. My reasoning on Jewels is that although it's seldom the best endgame option, it's good on such a variety of adventurers as to make it worthwhile early on when you're constrained on resources. It's one of the best filler prints for any units on your team when you're in doubt or lack other options to kit them out. Let's break down what makes this print so versatile. First, the strength benefits DPS units, and the skill haste sometimes helps for specific characters. Second, the skill haste benefits lots of buff bots. Third, strength increases healing, and skill haste can affect healing uptime, again depending on the specific healer. Lastly, the HP 70% condition is easy to maintain unless you're playing a character who intentionally tries to stay at low HP. This makes Jules a very complete jack of all trades and master of none when it comes to Wyrmprints. It works just fine on pretty much any type of unit. I should also mention here 2 prints you'll want eventually, but not as a beginner priority pick over Jules. Breakfast at Valerio's and Memory of a Friend are ultimately stronger for attackers in the endgame than Jules, but they require that you maintain a 20-hit combo, making them less beginner-friendly, worse on AI, and useless on most healers. A further con to Breakfast is that a better limited-time print exists. In this case, that print is Primal Crisis, which was given out for free during the Monster Hunter crossover. That Wyrmprint remains one of the best prints around today. The best print to purchase third is Study Rabbits. Veterans will be surprised to see this choice since it's seldom used in the endgame. However, this Wyrmprint does a number of things well in the early and mid-game. First, it's another reasonable catch-all, beginner-friendly Wyrmprint that you can throw onto any unit. Second, it's a solid print to equip to healers, and a reasonable starter print to use on a healer helper. Third, and most important, it's a way to survive all of the High Dragon opening blasts with one print. If you aren't aware of this, each High Dragon trial begins with a screen-wide, unavoidable AoE attack that serves as a gear check on your unit's defense, elemental resistance, and HP. Historically, the only way to survive these checks for many adventurers was to craft Great Worm-specific Wyrmprints that bolstered your resistance within each individual trial. Nowadays, entry requirements are much more lax. Several rounds of version updates have combined to make Study Rabbits perfectly sufficient for this purpose. First, the damage of High Dragon's initial attacks has been reduced. Second, Chain Co abilities now exist to boost elemental resistance, HP, and defense. And third, if all else fails, a revive system is in place just in case. Many players with the luxury of high facility levels or limited time event facilities may not remember how challenging it can be just to survive expert High Dragon trials. And while you can die and still clear thanks to the revive system, I think Study Rabbits is worthwhile to practice and perfect these fights while you're still building up your facilities. Its uses are certainly more limited in the endgame, perhaps even more so than Jewels of the Sun, but it does have a place in some endgame auto-battle team comps. The idea behind these 3 prints as initial investments is that you can now decently equip any type of adventurer. This makes it so that as you slowly build out your Wyrmprint collection, you'll always have at least a workable setup for any character, even if it's not their optimal one. Optimality doesn't matter all that much in Dragalia Lost until you're pushing the envelope of clear times, auto setups, or solo play. You may arrive at that point eventually, but for the time being, you can use Resounding Rendition plus Jewels of the Sun on attackers, Jewels and Study Rabbits on other types of units, and sometimes pair Resounding Rendition and Study Rabbits together if you're bringing an attacker or let's say a ranged attacker to a High Dragon trial. After grabbing these 3 basic picks, I'd recommend supplementing them with free Wyrmprints from past events in the event compendium. These can be unbound and obtained without spending any Eldwater, allowing you to save up your Eldwater stash for mana circles or future Wyrmprint purchases from the shop. They aren't good over the long term, but the compendium prints are entirely serviceable even if you leave them at level 1. That's because the abilities on a print only depend on how many unbinds it has. Levels just affect stats. Collecting these will help you in 2 ways. 1, it'll make grinding out the compendium content easier, and 2, it'll expand the volume of prints you have so you can equip a whole team instead of just a single unit. The best freebie prints from the compendium are Astounding Trick from Dream Big Under the Big Top, A Slice of Dragonule from The Miracle of Dragonule, and Luis's Hobbies from A Wish to the Winds. Trick is best among these, and it functions much like Jewels of the Sun in that you can slap it on almost any type of adventurer. Hobbies grants extra recovery, useful for healers to pair with Study Rabbits. And Slice is good if you just don't know what to equip someone with, or you need to round out your print slots on your team. The Greatest Gift is another nice pickup from the Miracle of Dragalia event since it comes at level 100 and its player EXP bonus is relevant for those who don't use Yuden on their teams. You'll also find single copies of stronger prints in the Compendium treasure trades, many of which are good. You shouldn't rush to spend Eldwater to unbind these. Hang on to them and unbind over time with any copies you randomly obtain down the road from drops or events. These prints include Forest Bonds, Stellar Show, the Prince of Dragalia, Sister's Day Out, and Gentle Winds at the time of recording. As with the freebie prints from the event compendium, these premium prints will help you grind as well. There's no need to spend precious Eldwater to purchase further prints just to clear compendium content. In general, you should keep any 5-star prints you obtain as random drops from other modes as well. You should keep 4-star prints with the buff skill time, affliction punisher, and healing double buff abilities. 3-star prints are not worth keeping from a gameplay standpoint, so you should only hang on to them if you care about collecting everything. And, well, you just might, since an encyclopedia feature was announced for Dragalia Lost some time ago, and it's technically possible that the encyclopedia will confer rewards based on your collection of prints whenever it's finally released. Therefore, there is a case to be made for keeping at least one copy of any prints you obtain, even 3 stars. I would say that decision is up to each player to make, since those prints are genuinely pretty useless and underpowered in battle. After spending some time on the compendium, you should have enough prints to equip a whole team. Having enough Wyrmprints to equip an entire team of adventurers makes it so that you can readily solo your way past early roadblocks like regular dragon trials, Imperial Onslaught, and Void Manticores. These are all steps you'll want to progress through as part of Nott's Royal Regiment. In addition, gearing out a whole team is helpful for early games in the Mercurial Gauntlet, a single-player only sandbag mode with rewards including a monthly trove of Eldwater, which expands in size based on your cumulative progress. Between my 3 beginner picks, compendium prints, and quest drops, you will be fine for lots of content in the game. At this point, I would advise using Eldwater to promote Yuden, Cleo, Ronzel, and Elisanne, then using more Eldwater to Mana Spiral Ronzel, and possibly Cleo, to obtain their upgraded shared skills. You probably also want to invest in bringing a Blade and a Wand adventurer to 50 nodes for their respective co-abilities. These Mana Circle upgrades and promotions will run you at least 400,000 Eldwater, so it's crucial to save up. Eventually, when taking on Master High Dragon trials and some Expert Agito trials, you're probably going to want to invest in stronger Wyrmprints for the adventurer or adventurers you plan to use most frequently. My suggestion is that you take a slow and steady approach to further print purchases, with an exception made for limited time and seasonal Wyrmprints like the Fires of Hate and Candy Couriers. I'll show a list of the most relevant limited time and event locked prints on screen now, so you know what to look for. These prints are limited at the time of recording, but it's possible that may change in the future. And of course, new limited time prints will release eventually. I recommend banking about 100,000 Eldwater if you want to be prepared for any must-have new prints that release. This amount is also sufficient to promote and power up a 4-star adventurer if you ever really feel the need to do so to clear new content. The names of all the Wyrmprints I'm showing on screen are in the description below. Once you've got some basic prints, promoted and upgraded core units, and have a stash of Eldwater, then you're probably ready to branch out. When you do, you may be wondering what prints are best. Many of the same Wyrmprints I recommended in my last guide video are still relevant now, and there's no predefined pick order for these. A lot will depend on which adventurers you opt to run, and which strategies you want to employ to clear high dragon trials and Agito battles. Instead, I've chosen to list out all the prints I'd say you'll want to have in your collection eventually. All these prints have applications on at least some adventures in the game, and I've tried to organize them by how broadly useful they are. Some prints are locked to specific elements or weapon types, so those are a bit narrower in use. Others, like Affliction Punisher prints, are theoretically narrow because of enemy resistances, but practically not because nearly all of the relevant late-game enemies are susceptible to at least some type of affliction. Others, like Buff Skill Time, Dragon's Claws, and Force Strike prints, are great, but only on certain adventurers. In general, I rate narrow prints higher if both of their abilities are good, which is why I have the Shining Overlord and Twinfold Bonds above other weapon-specific prints, and why I have Spirit of the Season and Me and My Bestie above the 4-star Affliction Punishers. Of course, the Fires of Hate and Candy Couriers would be in that upper tier as well. But as a matter of pragmatism, you should already be prioritizing them and any other relevant limited time prints I previously showed over any of these permanent ones. As before, the list of these permanent Wyrmprints is in the description. My final remark is about when to invest in multiple copies of the same Wyrmprint. I would err against doing this until you're very late in the game and already have all of the prints I've already shown so far. Most prints don't get better in multiples, and you only really want multiples for solo play, not co-op. The main prints you'd want multiple copies of are those which excel in highly linear strategies like low HP, double buff, or affliction team comps. If your specific setup relies upon explosive damage, then extra copies of Last Offense and Devastation prints are excellent. Likewise, the faster you end fights, the more prints like the Chocolatiers and Affliction Punishers contribute before falling off. Double buff prints tend to excel in multiples at the opposite end of the spectrum when you've set up a slower auto-battle team. And, well, that's pretty much all I have to say on Wyrmprints and where I stand as of July 2020. My take has shifted somewhat since my last guide, since I no longer think specialty abilities like Slayer Strength or Shapeshift Prep really matter enough at large to recommend investing in compared to other options. Progression is fast now that all elements have access to Chimera Tech weapons, which alleviates the need for niche prints, since those weapons are just strong enough to brute force all types of content. Instead, what's become more important than ever is conservation of Eldwater. Since my last guide, we now have mechanics like mana spirals, shared skills, chain co-abilities, and self-contained backlines, all of which have swung the pendulum towards spending more Eldwater on adventurers than Wyrmprints. Other than the prints I've shown in this video, and perhaps a handful more for very specific characters or scenarios, I really don't think you need much else, and your Eldwater is better saved or spent elsewhere. I estimate that all prints shown in this video, including relevant duplicates, would cost around 1.5 million Eldwater to obtain. Alright, and that's going to do it for my Wyrmprint guide this time around. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this is helpful for those of you who are just getting your footing in Dragalia Lost. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.